In a world that's always changing, there is one thing that never changes: God's unchanging Word. And now, from God's Unchanging Word Studios in New Orleans, we are pleased to bring you news, nuggets, and insights with today's host, Tom Carey.
Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to God's Unchanging Word, another edition for our news, nuggets, and insights. Today is Friday, December 17, 2021. As we begin the program today, we want to take a moment to ask for your remembrance, for all the prayers, the support for all those who lived in the middle of our country, for that tornado that went through just a week ago on Friday, for all those people who have lost lives of families and loved ones, and they're going to have a long time to go, lots of weeks, months, and years ahead to rebuild what this tornado has taken away from them. And we want to keep that in mind as we go through our program today. All right, we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to begin with fast-tracking prophecy, the sojourner within. It's interesting how God talks about prophecy, how the evil and the people who are evil, they just run to their devastation. Well, wait till you see what we're going to talk about today. Then in World Watch this week, we're going to talk about Germany. Merkel is out, and we have a new leftist party coming in, a socialist party of all, a coalition of different parties coming together who is not in favor of Israel. Then we have the new guardian in the UN. This picture of this animal, if you leave it up there on a screen for us or just a second, Jeff, in that lower left-hand corner, that animal looks like what you see in Babylon in the book of Daniel and Revelation. We're going to talk about that. And then we're going to do one more generation. This generation shall not pass, part 3. I'm going to try to tie that up today because it's very, very important, and it's going to tie into the sermon that I'm actually going to bring to you tomorrow. So let's begin with this. Another from you just can't make this stuff up. No matter how much you try, you can't. A woman breastfeeding a cat. A couple of shocks from our team here. Not anywhere feeding this cat. She had to do it on a flight on Delta. Let the whole world know that you're feeding this cat. We actually got a video, not of the feeding of the cat, but of the news clip about it. Let's play that video clip.
A woman who took a Delta flight recently wasn't kidding around when she whipped out her breasts and started feeding her hairless cat. The unidentified female flew from Syracuse, New York, to Atlanta, Georgia, where she was caught breastfeeding her feline on the plane. A flight attendant told her repeatedly to stop and put her cat back in its cage. However, the woman refused. A message was sent through the Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System (ACARS) to alert Delta crew in Atlanta that a passenger in seat 13A is breastfeeding a cat and will not put cat back in its carrier when flight attendant requested. A photo of the message board was found on Reddit and was posted on Twitter by author Eric Wilson. Flight attendant Ainsley Elizabeth, who was on board during the incident, took to TikTok on November 13 to explain more of what went down. This woman had one of those, hairless cats swaddled up in a blanket so it looked like a baby. Her shirt was up and she was trying to get the cat to latch and she wouldn't put the cat back in the carrier. And the cat was screaming for its life.
The cat was screaming for his life. It evidently didn't like that concept of being breastfed on an airplane. Anyway, you can't make that up. All right, let's go on. All right, I got this email from a member up in Canada who quite often sends us information. And this one is a prayer request, which is very important. The New Brunswick Minister of Health wants to issue more regulations. No jab, no groceries. So what we're beginning to see formulate all the way around the world is what could be like a foundation to seeing how far they can push for what is coming. Satan generally targets. He will pinpoint exactly what he's going to do before he does it. No one pays attention to it. So what you're beginning to see here is a formulation of what could be like a mark of the beast. Right? Unless you have the mark, you can't buy or sell. Now, we know this is going to transform into a spiritual or a godly thing down the road, but everything we're seeing now is beginning to formulate where it could lay a foundation for what the beast power is going to do in the very near future. For example, let's take a look at this. In Australia, Australia is forced for safe house for unvaxxed. Look at this. This is kind of humorous. I got this It's got some humor in it, but there's always truth and jest. So look at this. I'm going to read this. Stop calling it a concentration camp. It's just an Australian government-run facility where you're relocated by the military, detained and kept without a trial, and pursued and arrested for trying to escape. But it's all in the name of public safety. That's what they actually have down there. That's an actual camp. That's one of the biggest camps that they have there, that if you're unvaxxed or you need to be quarantined, they will literally come take you from your home and bring and put you in there for 11 to 14 days. If you try to escape, they will arrest you. And they charge you a $5,000 fine. Those are facts that we've been able to prove that's actually taken place. These are just headlines that I decided, let me go take a look at the interstate and see what's going on. Germany locks down unvaccinated people as leaders plan to make shots compulsory. Austria orders nationwide lockdown for the unvaccinated amid the COVID-19 surge. In the Dutch government extended evening lockdowns all the way into the new year, from now all the way into who knows how long. In the evening time, to keep everybody safe, you can be locked down, you can't go out. All of these things have a foundation for a beast power of buying and selling. So we need to be aware of what's going on here. We need to be prepared for this kind of what's coming. Now, here at home, inflation has surged 6.8% in November, even more than expected, the fastest rate since 1982. It's not transitory. This is going to be here for a while. They've admitted to that now after trying to tell us, well, it's just because of the vaccine or just because of the ships offshore. No, it's because of the government mandates and the regulations that have been coming down that are driving this into the cost that will not stop. Energy prices have risen 33.3% since November of 2020, including a 3.5% surge in November alone. Gasoline alone is up 58.1%, but I'm preaching to the choir. If you filled your car up lately, you know that. All of this transfers in all the way into the food, the cost of bringing product to the store, and it's all passed on down to you and I. So the fact that these cost increases, the money that they're spending and producing and printing over and over and over is not going to affect you was all just a big lie. Food prices have jumped 6.1% over the year, while used car and truck prices, a major contributor to the inflation, burst. I mean, do you realize that used vehicles now, you're paying more for a used vehicle than a new vehicle was 2 years ago? Go look online. You'll find that in most of the cars now, they were offering you, if you bought a car that's 2 years old, in some cases 3 years old, they will give you today what you paid for it back then. Even with 30, 40, or 50,000 miles on it, because they're turning them around. They can't get enough cars and they're selling them for much higher. We are really fouled up in this country. All right, so now let's move on here. Look what Haggai says. You have sown much, but you harvest little. You eat, but there is not enough to be satisfied. You drink, but there's not enough to become drunk. You put on clothing, but no one is too warm enough. And he who earns wages, and they put it into a purse with holes. And that's what's going on now. If you look at inflation, even with the increase, everybody says, oh, wow, we got a 4.6% average increase in pay across the board. Well, but inflation's eating that up. So what Haggai is saying, and it's talking about the end time of conditions that we're in, is that, yeah, you're harvesting. We've got inflation. People are making more money, but they're getting less for it. And that's what Haggai is warning us. And it's all because we will not follow the basic principles that God described and outlined in His Bible. And until we as a nation get on our knees and repent of the sins that God's given, that we've done toward God, we're not going to get out of this. And there's no way to make good what God has called evil. And that is the time that you and I are living in today. But I'm going to talk more about that in the second half of the program when we begin to talk about the times we live in today. And it's actually a sermon that I'm going to be bringing you tomorrow. So if you don't have a service to go to, tune in. Chances are you may not get us. I got to give you a warning in advance. We had Cox Cable out again just this Monday morning, and they said, oh, everything here is working. The problem is in the lines. And of course, they're still using the hurricane now. And so they can't promise when they're going to get it fixed for us, if ever. And I promise you, if we could have another place to go to that gives us the speed we need, we would transfer today. But in this area we are in, we have no other access to live stream right now. So keep praying for us. We'll get it out there. I can't help but to wonder if Satan doesn't have his hand in some of this. Because when this began just a year or so ago, we were almost 1,000 live stream viewers every Sabbath. Every Sabbath. And then it just cut out on us. So anyway, just keep praying about that. I didn't mean to go off on that tangent. All right, let's move on. Now, fast-tracking prophecy. God talked about their feet run to evil. Well, here we go. This is talking about the sojourner. We've used this before, but I want to show you in practical points today how this is actually taking place, and we're doing it to ourselves as God warned. In Yuma, Arizona, last week they had to declare a state of emergency as thousands of migrants were crossing the border. In just 1 week, they had over 8,000 in this one little community area. 8,000 of them, of the illegals coming in. That was in Yuma. They had so many illegals came in that they're wandering through the town, couldn't find anybody to turn themselves into. They were getting hungry, so they went to McDonald's and got food while they're waiting to turn themselves into somebody. You can't make it up. And that's just one town across the entire border. And they're still coming across into Texas. The Yuma Mayor Douglas Nichols had declared a local emergency due to the high number of undocumented people that have been crossing through the border city. The mayor said on Thursday the city needs federal and state resources to accommodate the influx of the people walking across from U.S. to Mexico border. Now, I heard one politician state this, and I couldn't have said it any better. He says, I don't know why all they're going to do is put more people into the United States faster. He said, if you bring them more help and more money, it's not the Border Patrol to stop them, it's the processes that they're asking for. So as the people come through, they have more people to process them faster to move them across into the United States. Now, we were told that the border is closed, and we were told that they have to go back to the pre-administration, keep them in Mexico first. So what has that done? It's done this. The migrants now rush to the border ahead of Biden restarting the Trump asylum policy. So all it did was escalate the amount of people who are coming in case they get trapped in Mexico. So we are just creating our own nightmare one step after another. Large groups, some of triple digits. It means this as many as 100 or more people at a time coming across. And every 20 minutes or every 30 minutes in different parts of the border, they're coming across. Where you have as many as 150, 160, and 70,000 a month, plus those who get away. They estimated as many as 40,000 got away last month. New York City moves to expand voting rights to the non-citizens. Remember now, this section is called fast-tracking prophecy. And the prophecy is the sojourner which is among you will get high above you, right? That's the prophecy that God says. And so we're doing everything in our power to make that prophecy come to pass faster now. We're on the fast track. New York City gives 800,000 non-citizens the right to vote. So you could be in America now, sneak in, be an illegal, get government support, government aid, school, health, and heaven help you lose your children somewhere by the government. You could get $450,000 for that one. And then now you can vote. So now what happens when you do this? New York City became the largest city in the country to allow non-citizens to vote in the local elections after the city council on Thursday overwhelmingly approved legislation granting the right to more than 800,000 legal residents. Now, let's think about the voting. What does that mean? Voting origins and the history of citizenship in the West reminds us that it is a rare phenomenon both in the past and in the present to give us enormous responsibility on its citizens to create and control their own government. If you were from Europe before the United States, you didn't vote on anything. It was dominated and controlled by the king or by the church. You didn't vote. And if you had land, you were responsible to the king or to the church if you owned land. People like you and I, there was no voting. There was no middle class back then. Citizenship requires a large and self-reliant middle class that is currently shrinking under the enormous economic strains. So now, when you allow a voting bloc in this one city, 800,000 people, if they live in one community, you begin a development of something that is a major problem. What is that? All right, we've covered it before, so let me develop our way into that story. New York's move of allowing non-citizens to vote could lead to other cities to follow. And not could, they will. They will, if they get away with this, which they have, they will have that going on around the country. It estimates that as many as 20 million people will fall into that category. And 150,000 or more a month are pouring in that's going to fall into this category as they come through. They're illegal, it doesn't matter, but they get citizen, they won't have to be a citizen to vote when they come through. Many cities would change the entire voting from right to left. Remember this, and we brought this up before. Country's first all-Muslim city council is elected in Michigan. Several communities around the country now have blocks of foreigners who came into America who've now not become a part of the community, has changed the community to become what they were before they left their old country. And so now we have right here in Michigan an entire city council and the mayor are all Muslim. So what does that mean? Well, it goes on even further. About half of the city's nearly 29,000 residents are estimated to be Muslim. So you see what happens, you begin to get this voting bloc where they begin to change. And remember the steps for being able to conquer a people. Peacefully, gain this power, gain the prominence, take over control. Well, you're seeing it step by step throughout the country right now in America. Where does it lead? It leads right to Washington. There's the development of Muslim voting bloc in Congress. So you're seeing it all over the place. Now, if you magnify this outside the United States, you go to the UN, the majority of the nations who vote in the UN who are anti-Israel are Muslim. So you're beginning to see that beginning to take place. By changing the laws that was set up under the Constitution that you have to be a citizen to vote, when you begin to break down the foundation and the structure of a nation, its voting power and what it stands for is destroyed. We're watching it right before our very eyes. All right, let's move to the next story. The World Watch in Germany. Now, I'm going to have a few pieces of the puzzle coming through with this into our next segment when we come back at the second half for our Nuggets portion of the program, because all this is going to tie in together what we're talking about. Germany, the traffic light government signals worry for the Jews. All right, so we know that there's going to be a king in the north, there's going to be a king in the south. We know that Germany, or the Assyrians, who actually just took over and destroyed Israel anciently, and we know that from the control and the domination in Europe for the last couple hundred years, Germany has been a part of the religious order with the popes and the control and the dynasties of Europe. And you're beginning to see that rising up again right now. It changed just in his last election, and now we have a different government coming in. The dangerous new thinking of Germany right now. Angela Merkel and her Christian Democratic Union Party are out. So what do we have? We have a no opposition to Iran getting nuclearization party. It's what they're standing on is that the enrichment alone will not produce a bomb. So in other words, give them a state, let them produce their nuclear weapons grade, but they won't have a bomb, so there's nothing to worry about. The amazing thing is this. It's quite interesting that the German government that has very important traffic light Green Party elements, remember the green? The green's peaceful, the green's the future, can't we all just get along, right? They're actually not opposing nuclearization of Iran. So while they're telling everyone else that we should just all get along, be at peace, let's go green, they're saying that Iran could build their bomb. Nobody can, let's not stop them. You see the conflict, what's going on here? And the people around the world they're not picking this up. They're buying this, say, oh, isn't that wonderful, this new coalition. So there's a problem now for Israel. And it's coming in Germany, another foundational building block for prophecy being fast-tracked. Chancellor Olaf Scholz calls himself the Traffic Light Party. This came December 8th, the Social Democratic Party. So now let's stop for just a second. What did we just hear? Remember what we've been talking about in prophecy? A former and a latter, right? The physical and the spiritual. So if we go back into World War II, which I'm going to do in the second half of this, and we go back to the party, what was Hitler? A socialist Democrat. So now we're seeing a government also transforming back into what it was when it began to rise up in power against Europe and especially against the Jews. You're witnessing the foundation formulating once more what it was back in the 30s and in the 40s. Actually began in the 20s, really. The Jewish leaders, activists, and analysts, however, fear that that coalition will make less progress in strengthening the Israeli and German ties, which it will. It's not going to be as tight as it once was. The new coalition party, Social Democrats, Environmentalists Green, and what they call the pro-business free Democrats. Christians are out. These three parties are portraying the combination of former rivals as a progressive alliance. Who is teaching this? The Pope. That's what this is all about. It's going into a one world, get along program for the 2030 agenda. And here is another foundation of that building block coming together right before our very eyes. At present, the only German party whose leaders openly question the establishment of a Palestinian state is the Alternative for Germany, and that's a party, Alternative for Germany, the name of the AFD. However, they came in last. There's very few people now looking toward supporting Israel. So you see the shift in Germany. The new culture minister, according to Sasha Stawski, head of the pro-Israeli Watchguard group, she said, "We now have a culture minister who is a close friend of the Iranians and who has bowed her head wearing a headscarf in the front of the mullah regime, in addition to being a supporter of the boycotters of Israel." Those who boycotters, well, she's out there supporting them. This is what they said from a headline. How the German Green Party made the Iranian anti-Semitism politically correct analysis. There's the story. In other words, they took an anti-Semitism policy and they made it acceptable for everybody. So the Germans now in Germany think it's proper to hate Israel. It's the acceptable way of thinking. That is what happened in the 1920s and the 1930s when Hitler took office. He began to change everybody's minds and thinking from people that they worked with, they went to school with, people that they loved, to hate them for no reason. Well, you're beginning to see that right here. And now they're moved into office. Now, what were we talking about in the elections in the United States? You're letting the non-vote citizens come in. What are their policies and what do they believe? Well, many of them you have to pull in from Central America, South America, and from Europe. They had, when they took in 800 people, 40 different countries in the last month. These people sneaking across in from South America and Central America into the United States because they can get in across the border and nobody's going to stop them. But if they come in legally, they can't get in. So we're watching a change in America just like there's a change in Germany. Now, let's put together another piece of the puzzle right here in the UN. A new guardian for the UN. How about that? A new guardian for the UN. A new monument was set up in the Visitors Plaza outside the entrance to the UN. That is actually the head or the face of this new monument that they put out there. It's called the Guardian for international peace and security. We used to think it was God. But now we're getting just like ancient Israel was, is that statues are being put everywhere. Churches are being put everywhere. And God's removed out of the picture. There's the actual statue that's outside of there. So if I blow up with the writing that's inside of there, here's what it says. This is actually from the UN. A guardian for international peace and security sits on the Visitors Plaza outside the UN headquarters. The guardian is a fusion of a jaguar and an eagle. Now, this was donated by Mexico. All right, so it's got the looks of Mexico, which I didn't catch that Audrey caught. If you look at the wings and you blow it up, it's gay. I just looked at all the colors. Well, I knew that's Mexico. That's got to be Mexico or Central America. But on the wings themselves, they're headed by the colors of the gay movement. And it also has the look, they call it a jaguar, but it has the look of a leopard, like you see in Daniel. And so when you look at what's going on here in the Guardian, it has all the resemblance of what we see in Daniel and in the book of Revelation, even though it's a little bit different. But when you look at the paws, like the feet of a bear, you see that? And the teeth of a lion. So you can call it a jaguar, but it has all the entrappings of what we look for in Revelation and Daniel. Daniel 7, verse 3 and 4. It says, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another. And the first was like a lion, and he had the eagle's wings. And I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted from the earth and made stand upon his feet as a man. And the man's heart was given to it. So there you see that now out front of the UN right here in New York. Amazing. Look at Revelation 13, verse 2. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. Now, you and I are going to begin to see a lot more of that with the UN. This great beast power coming all together is going to have control and is going to have power and authority. And it's interesting that it's put right there. Remember, I told you what Satan does. He targets, he tells you in advance. What God's showing us here is not just this, but the timing of this. Now, this is very important, what I want to show you here, because it's critical that we understand the timing of this event. When this came over here in November, this came over in a Shemitah year. All right, this is the final 7th year of this 7-year time cycle. Why is that important? I'm going to show you that in just a second. But let's look at this verse first. And it was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. So we know that the key, the very purpose when Satan comes back, that he's so angry when you read this verse, is that he's got one goal and one purpose. He's coming after the elect. God allowed this to take place as a warning for you and I that Satan now is beginning to make his move. We saw that 7 years ago in 2015. Let me show you. Let's go through this. The guardian for international peace and security, this is in 1 Thessalonians 5. For you yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. So why am I bringing that here? It's because everybody out there now who looks at this say, isn't that cute? That's pretty cool. Yeah, I really like that. This really brings a lot of attention. When they look at this, you know that he comes as a thief in the night. When they say peace, there is no peace. We know the scripture, right? So here we have Satan brings in this beast, sets it in the UN, the entrance to the United States for the rest of the world, and says, here's your peace. This is your guardian. Removing God out of the picture. So there is no peace. And we're looking at it now when God says he's coming after the elect. So when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. That is the time frame that we're moving in. So what are we looking at here? This is a chart that we've been using, and I'm just going to run this through because I'm going to cover some of this in the second half. But I want to show you a time frame. What we're looking at is, remember, we're looking at 7-year periods of warnings, remember? And even in the curses, God says, I'll bring you 7 times more plagues, more problems. So you have a 7-year period between 2008 and 2015. What happened in 2015? That's when the Pope was here and he began to tell us what he's going to do till 2030. Satan knows he has but a short time, and he came over here and telegraphed what he's doing and who he's going after. Revelation says he's going after the elect. Well, there they are. And we went through this in the past, so I'm not going to take the time to cover that now. But if you've never seen it, go into our website, look at the Holy Roman Revival. There's 3 parts, and it goes in depth what I'm telling you right now. Now, let's look at the second 7-year period. Now here we are into that 7th period. I know it's 2021. I've got 2022, but the 7-year period began on atonement of 2021 to atonement 2022. So now in this 7-year period, now we got the statue shows up. He comes in, tells us what he's going to do, and now we got this statue coming in telling us how he's going to do it. So what are we looking at for 2022? This is going to absolutely astound you, what I'm going to bring out now. One World Religion Headquarters set to open in 2022. The headquarters will be called the Abrahamic Family House. It is being built on an island in the middle of the eastern city of Abu Dhabi. You see those buildings that's in that picture? Let's pull that up, Jeff. On those buildings, you'll see 3 of them. It focuses on the 3 religions: Christianity, Judaism, and the Muslims. Sorry about that. The Muslims. And each building will have a representation in this piece that's coming up. It's in collaboration and support of the Pope. Absolutely amazing. The headquarters is being done in collaboration with Pope Francis and the Sunni Muslim leader Sheikh Ahmed Al-Tayeb. They both signed the Global Peace Covenant called the Document of Human Fraternity and World Peace, and we covered that 2 years ago, and I'm going to play a video clip from our News Nuggets and Insights in just a few minutes that we covered this one world government back in 2 years, and we told you what to watch for, that it was coming. Well, it's beginning to be here. It's going to start next year. But let's play this video, a little 3-minute video piece about this new building, the Abraham House. One world religion. I'd like to bring to your attention, you notice that you don't see anything about Israel signing on to this. Interesting. All right, let's move on. Now, we covered one world religion, that it was coming, and you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to understand it because Revelation told us that. So we covered that back February 22nd, almost 2 full years ago now. This was back in the news with the conference that he set historical meetings in the UAE. He was visiting for the very first time in that Arabian Peninsula. All right. So now I went back, I looked at our videos, and I was going to cover it today, but I said, well, we already covered it. So why don't I do this? I'm going to play you from 2 years ago what we said back then that's happening right now. Let's play that. The Pope Francis, back in the news. This time he's going to Morocco. Now look at this. It's the cross and the crescent. So what is that all about? All right, let's talk about what's coming on now. It says no such thing as Christianity and Islam are irreconcilable. Actually, there is. Some people say that's not reconcilable. Well, there is. Believe it or not, there really is a religious movement called Chrislam. It began in Nigeria in 1980 or in the 80s as an attempt to foster peace between Muslims and Christians by blending elements of Islam and Christianity. Now, here's the problem with that. It's 2 different gods. The very first commandment of the Bible says, "Thou shalt be no other gods before me." The second is that Islam does not accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And the Bible tells us that there is no other way. The two cannot be merged. It is impossible to do that. But that's what they're doing, and this is being led by the Pope. Its followers stress the commonalities between the two faiths, that they are recognize both the Quran and the Bible as holy text. Unbelievable what we're beginning to see going on. But if there's going to be one world religion, you're going to have to see it being put together. And as we see in Revelation, there will be the man of sin, and you will find the great false prophet, the Holy Roman Revival, all come together to control the world at the end time. The Vatican releases the program for apostolic journey to Morocco. The Pope will travel to North Africa country at the end of March. On Saturday, the 30th of March, that the Holy Father, and I didn't put that in there, I'm just reading the quotes that comes out there. They call themselves the Holy Father, will be received by King Mohammed VI before the meeting of the Moroccan people, the civil authorities, and the diplomatic corps reported. During the 2-day trip, Pope Francis will meet with the leader of the Moroccan Muslims 800 years after the meeting between St. Francis of Assisi and the Sultan al-Malik al-Kamal of Egypt. And that is the logo that they're using, 800 years, that they're finally coming back together to talk again. Well, this Pope, since he's gotten into office, has made it his mission to have one world religion. And he is going through his ecumenical movements. He's been here with the United States and brought many of the Protestants back over to Rome to meet with him. And then now he's pulling together a lot of the Muslims to be brought into it. There's also another area that he's bringing into, which I'll show you in just a second. The Catholics susceptible to Chrislamism. Chrislamism, now that's got a mouthful to it. In other words, we're part of the Chrislamism movement here. Catholics are highly susceptible to the allure of Chrislamism. Many of them feel that a reconciliation between Islam and the Catholicism is possible. What reconciliation? They never were apart from one another. It is from the Bible at the beginning where God talked about 2 seeds. Right? The 2 seeds. We've seen that theme throughout. There's God and there's Satan. There is no unity here. There can never be unity. So there cannot be a reconciliation. There never was. It says they are found in saying that we all worship the same God. What a lie. Absolute, bald-faced, unequivocal lie. There is not but one God. All right? And they invariably cite the passage in the Catholic Catechism which says, together with us, they, the Muslims adore the one merciful God. I dare say they do not, and that is why you see the persecution that's been going on and on and on, and even to this day where they're wiping out Christianity in the Middle East with every chance they get. So the entire process, the entire thought process is built upon a lie and deception on mankind. So this one world religion, I brought these two pictures in because I wanted to show you when he travels with his plane, whatever plane they're written at the time, or leasing, you see one world? That is on the information and the passages and the paraphernalia that they give out everywhere they go. One world, okay? One world, one religion. And that's what the Pope's been after. So that's what we said 2 years ago. And you're seeing it come to pass right now. And the Bible prophesied that it would. All right, we're going to take a break from our first half. We're going to tie all of that in now to the second part of our program and pull out the nuggets portion of it. We're going to get into part 3 of This Generation Shall Not Pass. Before we do, got a little short video here, just a little over a minute and a half long. Fear not, and I'll be right back. All righty, welcome back. I couldn't wait to get into this section today with you, and This Generation Shall Not Pass. This is the third week in a row that we've been covering it, but I've got a lot to cover today, and it's actually pulling in information that I'm going to bring into a sermon tomorrow. So I'm going to put the accounting of it today. I'm going to bring in more of a spiritual significance into the sermon tomorrow on the sermon that I'm working on. Remember now, we're talking back from December 7th, 1941, and we connected to This Generation Shall Not Pass till all these things be fulfilled. Now we know when Jesus said that 2,000 years ago, that the people who were alive at the time who heard it, well, they're gone. So it could not apply to them. So it had to apply to all the passages of what was said before he made that statement. And one of them is that it was possible to destroy all mankind. Remember? He said no flesh would be saved. So because of that, he was going to cut time short. That generation, when it was possible for that to take place, that generation shall not pass. So that's what we're looking at here, which fulfills the spiritual intent of what Jesus Christ was saying. So now let's connect the dots historically and biblically to what's going on. Now this is a slide that I'm going to be using tomorrow. So let me give you the introduction to this. We talked about duality of events. This has been taking place for centuries. This actually took place in the Old Testament. Wait till you see this connection. God gave Nehemiah and Ezra a former physical example to look at, just as he gives it to us today to look at. Remember what I said is there's a former physical and there's a latter spiritual. Well, when you look at the book of Nehemiah, you see that God did the exact same thing for them with the exact same thing he tells us today to go look at. Now the difference is when they were back then, what God told them to look at was more alive at that time for them that they could relate to. For us, we relate to something that's closer to us just like it was to them. But it's the same thing to look at with different examples. Let me show you. After Nehemiah had completed the rebuilding of the breach of the walls in Jerusalem, Ezra began to instruct the people as they went forward. He begins by reminding them of their covenant with the Eternal. So what I'd like for you to do is when you finish the program, go into Nehemiah and look at chapter 9. What Nehemiah does is he brings them back to their covenant with God, and he tells them to go look at what happened to the Israelites who were in Egypt. Now, what have we been doing? Remember 1 Corinthians 10? He says, I recorded all of these events so you don't make the same mistakes. Well, Nehemiah is telling them the exact same thing. Go look at what the Israelites did. God does the same thing for us in 1 Corinthians 10. Now, all these things happen to them for examples, and they are written for our admonition upon who the ends of the age have come. Now, look at Luke 12. Now, this is very, very important. And it's amazing because, see, the religious leaders today of our time have no clue of the events of what's taking place, just like Jesus told the Pharisees in his day. Jesus condemned the Pharisees in Luke 12, 54 and 55, because they could discern the weather. He says, but they couldn't discern the times they lived in. Just like today, people can't discern the times we're living in today. They're going to go on, they go to their jobs, they live, they die, they get married, they go to work, and expect they're going to die and go to heaven. Not realizing that everything we're talking about are warning signs that the end of this age is coming. He says, you hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky and of the earth, but how is it you're not able to discern this time? That's the same thing going on right now in our nation and around the world. So now let's take a look at it. I'm going to look at things in a different perspective than I've been bringing to try to see if I can eliminate some of the clutter. Because when you work on the same subject for 7 years of this end time message and you draw this timeline, it becomes so many pieces that unless you've covered it from the beginning, it becomes confusing to you. So now, what I'm doing here, I'm going to take a different approach today, and one very similar to what Nehemiah did with the children of Israel in his day. So now let's take a look at something that we can relate to first. What did Nehemiah tell them back then? Go look at your covenant with God and Abraham and what happened to the children of Israel. So now, it tells them how they got to where they were and the condition they were in. So now let's go look at something we can relate to like they did. All right, so now, Matthew 24. There'll be great tribulation, not was since the beginning, you know that. And except those days should be short, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, he's going to cut that time short. So the time you live in and I live in today, let's go look at the connection to something we can relate to, just like they did with Nehemiah and the children of Israel back then. What are we looking at? Right? I'm going to keep that, on that timeline. Remember from to 1945, 1952. There's the atomic bomb. It was the countdown to Armageddon. We know the bomb. We know Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and it was dropped. It marked the end of World War II. Now let's put that in place. That was 1945, right? We all know that the war ended in 1945. Let's not forget now, just like we did earlier in the show, we have 7-year periods. Remember, like 2015 to 2022, right? So now, God's timing, it seems to encapsulate the 7-year periods. As Daniel said, he rises and he removes kings, governors, and nations. And at the end time, it seems more prominent than ever that that's what God is doing. So 1945 ended World War II. When did it begin? 1938, a 7-year period, right? Now, let's move on. So remember the scripture, God says, unless he cuts time short, no flesh would be saved. Now, here's something you've probably never seen before. Let's go to the next bomb, the hydrogen bomb. The hydrogen bomb was detonated in 1952. That's 7 years. That's 7 years. It was 10 megatons, 3,800 times the time of the Hiroshima bomb. So here we have in 1952 a massive bomb, 38 times more powerful. But they also had enough weaponry by 1952 to destroy all mankind. So now, here's what we're looking at. Let's put that on the track of 1952. So now, at this particular time, now we've got something pointing out physically we can relate to. That unless God cut time short, if the war didn't end right here, by 1952, we'd have had the hydrogen bomb, and it's believed that somewhere between 1948 and 1952, there were enough nuclear bombs to destroy mankind many times over. Even in the physical, what God's showing us, that we can understand this. At this point in time, if the war wasn't ended, there was enough nuclear weapons between the United States and Russia at that time that this whole world could have been destroyed. So God cut the time short. He ended the war. It was 1945. Now, that is a serious connection. 7 years, 7 years, 7 years. Now, let's take a look at a little further. Had it kept going on like it was, we see the biggest hydrogen bomb ever exploded was 50 megatons. It was 1961. It was 19,000 times greater than Hiroshima. One bomb, 19,000 times greater. And they had more than one. Today, there are thousands of nuclear weapons on missiles that can shoot them all over the world. In a matter of minutes to an hour, we can destroy this entire planet. But like 1945, God says he's going to cut time short so that it doesn't get to that stage. So now what we've seen was an age that entered to the nuclear age. We would have entered into a hydrogen age. And right now, the age we would enter would be the very same way. Tying that into Scripture now. 45, the first atomic, the hydrogen, and the largest hydrogen in 1961. God tells us that the time of mankind is 70, 70, or if possible, God gives you good health, maybe 80 years old. So what we're looking at, remember the Scripture, that this generation shall not pass. When it was possible to destroy all mankind off the face of the earth, when was that? Probably 1948 to 1952. We put that on the timeline of what God says he's given to man, 70 years, puts us between 2018 and 2022. However, if God gives us the 80 years, it puts us to 28 to 32, that generation shall not pass. Now we're in a time frame when we do an overlay that's somewhere up in here. Now we've got the Pope coming in with his 2030 agenda. Now that's what Hitler was trying to do. Remember? He was going to begin a 1,000-year reign. Well, that's what the Pope wants. He wants to do a 1,000-year kind of reign right here on this earth, taking the place of Jesus Christ. The key to the timing is Matthew 24, verses 21 and 22. All right? Here's the Pope's agenda in 2030. So now, this is what we had before. I've cleaned it up. I'm just keeping it focused on one thing today. There we have our Shemitah years, our 7-year time cycle, 2015, 2022, and 2029. All right, so those are our 7-year periods, just like 1931, 1938, 1945. So now let's look at that, all right? So now we have 1945, 1938, the beginning of the war, and 1931, the rise of power. So now you're looking at the Pope. It's like 2015, the Pope begins his rise to power. He comes to America, he tells you what he's going to do. So he begins his rise to power, just like Germany did with Adolf Hitler. By the time the second 7-year period began, Hitler now is in power and the war begins. So what are we looking at? Satan knows he has but a short time. 2022 could be a pivotal period for this planet. You see the one world religion coming together. We're seeing the United States acquiescing to the rest of the world. We know we're going to begin another 7-year period. When we look at the time frame, we're looking at a total war and annihilation. So we're looking at a time period that it looks devastating for all of us. What are we looking at? We could see the beginning of what you're looking at the end time of the seals and the tribulation begin to show up during this 7-year period. Now, we don't know for sure, so let me do this. Suppose God moves it just a little bit. It's going to happen very soon regardless. We don't know the day or the hour, but we certainly know the season that God says we're to look for, and we are in it. It's unmistakable. Just like he warned the Pharisees, you can't tell the time you live in. The people today in this world cannot tell the time that they're living in. But God has revealed that to his servants. And he's telling that to us first. And it's imperative that we pay attention to what's going on. Now, I'm going to cover a lot more of this tomorrow in the sermon as part 3 on the series is kings and priests going after your identity in the kingdom. That's what we're going after. Amazing what God has put and restored and kept in his book, his holy book for you and I. There ain't no Holy Quran, only the Holy Bible. All righty, from the home office. I want to bring this out that on our website, I know we hadn't gotten into Christmas, and I really wanted to do it today, but I honestly thought today's program was more important. I think most of our listeners are aware of Christmas. We don't keep Christmas. I think you're aware of that. But if there's somebody new in the family that is new to the program or new and they come to church with you or worshiping with you, is that on our website, I call this Satan's Holy Trinity of counterfeit. You have Christmas, Mardi Gras, and Easter, right? So if you haven't seen it for a while, go to the website, December 25th, the day of the invincible sun. It's a powerful message showing you the pagan origins of Christmas and why we condemn that day. All right, in the mail last week, actually I think it was 2 weeks ago, is The Spirit of Fear by Danny Ellis. In the sermon that we offered in the card a month or so ago is A Nation in Crisis. If you haven't got those sermons yet, be sure to write in and get them, or you can go online. Tomorrow I'm going to be doing this message, Repairing the Breach. And I'm going to compare the time that you and I live in today, because you see, you, whether you realize it or not, and I, and all of God's people, and all the churches of God, are the advanced team. And what was the advanced team? That was Nehemiah. What did they do first? They went in and they began to repair the breach of the wall. For you and I, that is in type, is the covenant that God gave up with us, is to begin the reparation of the covenant of God's people. We broke it down. We don't follow God anymore. Even the covenant God made with our nation is being broken down. And it's for us to be the advanced team putting all that together so that when Jesus Christ comes back, he will be the type of Ezra, our high priest. And he'll begin reading. And by the way, if you didn't know it, when did Ezra begin reading? On the Day of Trumpets. That's right. The return, the day picturing the return of Jesus Christ. The beginning, the reparation, and the repairing of the breach of the walls. And that's what you and I are doing today. God has got an incredible story for you and I. And like that little video you saw between the first half and the second half of this program, when everything inside you want to scream with fear, we look to God and we hold our heads high because he is our strength and our salvation. He is our fortress. And he will help us to repair the breach in the walls. All right, that's it for our program today. I sure hope you enjoyed the program. I have a lot to tell you. So in closing, as we do every week, let's close it with a little video here. God loves you, and I'll be right back. Say goodbye.
We are often told, God loves you. But what does that really mean? That some impersonal force, galaxies away, may consider you from time to time? Or that you are a single drop in a vast ocean of humanity, and God cares for all of it? There are billions of lives, billions of stories. Can we really believe he has great destinies planned for all of them? Surely the ruler of the universe has more important affairs than to notice the needs of one singular individual. But hear this, nothing could be further from the truth. When God says, I love you, it means that he crafted every detail of your being, your every feature, is His perfect design. His mind perceives your worries and your thoughts. His heart is broken by your pain. You are His child, created in His image. Your value exceeds all the riches of earth. Your worth extends beyond the stars. And though you may be unaware, He's carefully constructing the events of your life to build His kingdom. If you are willing, He can and will achieve wonders through your hands. It is the deepest passion, the most meaningful promise. It is your security, your hope, and your future. It is the truth beyond doubt. God loves you.
Well, welcome back. Well, that's it for our program today. So we bring this to a close. Let me remind everyone to keep in your prayers all those families in that horrible path of all those tornadoes last week, and pray that God will give them peace and comfort. A lot of lives were lost and a lot of pain, a lot of suffering that's been going on. Pockets all around our nation and around the world are suffering from what they call climate change. What God tells us that He's continuing to bring His curses upon this world until they repent. They refuse to accept and believe it. But you and I have been called to rise above all that, to give hope to this world, a dying world, that Jesus Christ is coming back. He's going to restore His kingdom. He's going to put everything back in its rightful order, the way that it should be. There will be a time that even death will be conquered. Pray that that day come and that it comes soon. Well, that's it. God willing, we'll see you next week. But don't forget, before we leave, share this with everyone you know. They're going to love you for it or not. Till next week, God be with you.